Hi, this is Josh Kulp. This is the video for Daf Shevui, Daf Ayin Gimmel of Masechet Ketubot. I want to talk a little bit about this machloket, this dispute that occurs throughout this page between Rav and Shmuel. Maybe clarify it for a moment and just talk in general about sort of the way I read some of these more obscure disputes, these obscure discussions in the Talmud, and what I read them as being truly about. So let's just remind ourselves what the case is. The Rav and Shmuel debate a case where a man betrothed a woman on condition that she not have any vows, and then married her without such a condition. Now, whether or not the Mishnah refers to such a subject, I don't want to talk about. In other words, when he betrothed her, he said to her, I'm betrothing you on condition that you don't have any vows. And then when he married her, he didn't reiterate that condition. And the real question is, by marrying her without reiterating that condition, is this a new act of marriage? In which case, he at least has to give her a get. That's Rav's position. Rav is in essence saying he's renewing the act of betrothal or marriage, and therefore he has to give her a get. Or has he really just, is this a continuation of the original faulty betrothal? And if it's a continuation of the original faulty betrothal, so there's no legality, there's no legal consequences to the marriage either. This occurs again on the second page, the third section, I think, that we're talking about this machloket, where we have the case of a Braita, where it says explicitly if somebody betrothed a woman on condition, and then later on they had intercourse, which in the Mishnah and the Talmud is basically essentially the same as marriage, whether or not that act of intercourse affects legal acquisition, such as she's married to him, such that she would require a get. Now, this is a topic of great interest. I've talked about it before, but of great interest to the rabbis, the relationship between betrothal and marriage. Today, we do betrothal and marriage at the same time under the chuppah, so there is no such question. Betrothal and marriage are essentially just two parts of the same service, and therefore all of these questions, really from the time of the Middle Ages, have disappeared. But in the Talmud itself, they did kiddushin and marriage as two distinct stages, occurring a year apart. And the rabbis are often asking the question of what's the relationship between the two? When is the marriage really sealed? If there's a problematic kiddushin, which is the question we're asking here, does that automatically disqualify the nisuin, the marriage? Or really, can we look at nisuin as, in essence, not the second half of kiddushin, but really an act in and of itself, which is what I would say is Rav's position. To get to the sort of larger, broader question of how I read disputes like this, I don't read them as having all that much practical significance. Practically speaking, people shouldn't put themselves into such situations. They should avoid such conundrums. They should avoid such messy situations. Anytime that marriage has been supervised by rabbis have been adamant, such that people should make sure that they distance themselves from any safek, any doubt whatsoever. To a certain extent, you can see that with the get in the Talmud already. Rabbis seem to have been supervising, at least through the scribe, the giving and the writing of the get, and therefore they have exacting demands such that there is no doubt whatsoever what the husband's intent is, that the writing is done correctly, so that there's no doubt whatsoever that he is divorcing her. It doesn't seem like they had that control over kiddushin, practically speaking, but if they did, if you're asking a rabbi, they would have said, never do such things. Like, always be clear. So what are they doing with these rabbinic dicta? In my opinion, they're in essence exploring the legalities of what's the relationship between betrothal and marriage. In other words, I read them as a sort of legal philosophy as opposed to halacha l'maaseh, practical halacha. Practically speaking, don't do these kinds of things. Philosophically speaking, it's very interesting to explore extreme circumstances in which the act of betrothal and the act of marriage seem to be in conflict with each other. So that's a general approach I think that it's worth taking quite often when you're learning Talmud, so that you put aside the frequently asked question, whoever does such a thing, why would anyone ask such a question, and instead really ask the question, what is this telling us about the nature of the legal institutions that are being discussed?